We going all out, about to start a war now. Second time around, so we doing it in style. It's all elite, not accepting defeat. A lot can change in 1 year, but more can change in 1 week. Believe the hype, the train's leaving tonight. Hit the throttle, we heading straight to Chicago. It's only getting better, this is our future endeavor. I can't wait to see the fight between Pac, Kenny, Omega. It's bound to be killer, the winner have to consider it. Will all be over quicker, deliver the V-trigger.
Welcome back, All Elite family, to another exciting edition of the All Elite podcast. It's been a while since we've been on the air. We took about a week off for Christmas vacation. AEW was off. They did air AEW Dark last week, but otherwise not a whole lot going on within the organization, so not a whole lot of a reason to do a podcast last week. So AJ took that time to spend it with our families, enjoy the holidays, things like that. But we are ready to get back to it. AJ, how have you been, bud?
Things are all right. Some family stuff going on, but other than that, I've been getting writing done. Got casting almost done for a short film. Things are going all right.
Happy to hear that you're at least keeping busy, dude, and sticking with the writing thing and keeping a lot of positive outlooks on that and some good things going there. I'm doing good. I've just been hanging out, like I said, enjoying the holidays for the most part, enjoying that time with my family, the first real Christmas with my daughter where we were able to experience that type of thing where she was able to open presents and do the whole type of thing. So that was really fun and exciting time, and so it's just been a good time. I was able to get some pretty cool podcast-related presents, I guess you could say, from my family and stuff like that, so that's always appreciated, of course. And so it's just great to get back to things, and I'm really excited. We have a lot of things to talk about, a lot of AEW news. We also have to talk about the final rankings of 2019 because, as AJ and I speculated, they are going to reset the rankings, and we'll talk about that here in a moment. We also have to talk about some of the best and worst AEW segments of the year based on ratings and losing and gaining fans. I saw a tweet on that I thought was really interesting that me and AJ will cover briefly. We'll also talk about last week's episode of Dark and then go over the full Dynamite card for this week, which is a pretty stacked card in and of itself. So a lot of things to get to, AJ. But the first thing on our list, Tanahashi versus Chris Jericho at Wrestle Kingdom, a match that I wasn't too interested in when it was initially promoted and talked about and speculated upon. But boy, now am I really, really intrigued. Yeah. If you are unaware, if you're a listener who doesn't know what's going on, Chris Jericho is going to wrestle in Wrestle Kingdom 14 in the next, on January 5th, right?
4.
Is the 4th the second day? I wasn't sure how they were running it. If it was the 3rd and the 4th.
I'm not sure either.
But regardless, they're running it on the second show or the second date. They're doing Tanahashi and Jericho, and the stipulation essentially is that if Tanahashi wins, he gets a shot at the AEW Championship, which is really exciting for fans of AEW and New Japan Pro Wrestling because you didn't really think that this relationship could possibly be teased, but now going into the new year, it's almost as if it might happen, and it's something that we're really excited for.
Bro, I've never wanted Tanahashi to go over more in my life. I am so excited for this. I really hope Tana wins. I hope this isn't just a marketing tool because they know Jericho's going over or something. But I don't know. It's Wrestle Kingdom. It's Tanahashi. There's a high chance that Tanahashi comes out, leaving the fans happy.
And of course, the biggest disappointing thing I think that could happen is you do have Tanahashi win, but then you get the title defense in New Japan, so it never really helps AEW. It's something they might be able to throw on. Like if they were to throw it on Dark, it would still be massive for that show, but it would be hard to utilize that on just the Dynamite show itself. So that would be the only potential downside I could see to everything they have going on there. But
which isn't even a huge downside, because that still builds that relationship.
Yeah, at the end of the day, they are recognizing the relationship because it sort of stemmed as something like it was teased a little bit where I think Tanahashi initially referenced it saying, well, if I beat Jericho, shouldn't I get a shot at the AEW title? And everyone in wrestling kind of stopped and was like, well, yeah, that's true. That's what should happen. And it led to a lot of speculation. And, of course, Jericho, the genius that he is, hops on social media, does a quick promo on the situation, essentially saying that if Tanahashi can possibly beat him, then Jericho would, of course, give him a championship opportunity, which is huge. And then we get the confirmation from New Japan, their social media, just referencing the situation as well. So It's really big for anyone who has wanted and been anticipating that relationship. And it's something that could really benefit AEW in the way that NXT has utilized that main roster, WWE. If AEW is able to utilize the New Japan roster in any way, especially Tanahashi of all people to begin with,
Yeah.
the only way I think you get any better than that is Okada. So,
Yeah.
or if it's maybe equal, you say Naito. But otherwise, like,
No, it's Okada. Come on.
well, no. What I'm saying is Okada would be the biggest get you could, but if you got Naito, it would be kind of be on the same level of Tanahashi,
Oh, yeah,
where
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like super exciting, super cool. But Okada's the big one, the one that.
Yeah.
But you'd love to see that with Kenny down the line in AEW. So who knows? This could all be for nothing. Jericho could just go over, and that would be interesting in and of itself because it really puts over AEW sort of wins no matter what happens here because Jericho either goes over a prominent New Japan star or Jericho loses and then gets to defend his title against a prominent New Japan star. And hell, if he loses that, like, that's even, I mean, I wouldn't say it's necessarily better because I don't know how people would feel about Tanahashi as AEW champion or even the realistic possibility of that, I think, is more so what pulls me back on it, if anything. But it's still interesting to fantasy book or fantasy dream those type of things going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I love Tanahashi. I'm a diehard fan, have been for a long time. So I'm super stoked for this. Yeah, like you said, AEW really doesn't lose no matter what happens here. So this is all around good. And I think even if Jericho does win, it's still notable that they're talking about AEW and the AEW championship, and they're not just sweeping that under the rug.
Oh yeah, dude, and like that's what I mean. Is it just no matter what they win, no matter what, it's a prominent thing for AEW for that relationship and the seeds to be like start to be planted there, and you start to see the real chance of this thing potentially starting to form, which would be a great relationship for both sides. New Japan losing their television deal in the U.S. over the last month because of something that went on with Axis. You have to imagine that they would love to get that exposure on American TV on TNT, which is a network that would be way bigger than being on Access in anyway. So overall, I'm excited for it. I think that is a great potential thing, and it really brought me, someone who wasn't maybe paying attention to Wrestle Kingdom so much, way more excited to what's going on that weekend.
Yeah, absolutely. Wrestle Kingdom is going to be amazing, and more so now.
Yeah, so I'm excited for that, and I really am pulling for now a Tanahashi win over the AEW champion just to really solidify that. Yeah, and you know me, I've never really been a big Tanahashi guy. I've never been, and so when you said that you never wanted to see Tanahashi win more in your life, it really hit me because I'm like, yeah, dude, I'm right there with you. I want to see that win because again, I'm not a big Tanahashi fan. Never really been behind him as much as others have, but I can respect the legend or just
the body of work,
the body of work that he's created. So that in and of itself says a lot that if we can pull him into the fold, it can be big for AEW. So I'm excited for it. It's great news.
Yeah, man.
In other exciting news, I'm not sure how excited I am about it, but the idea of it is interesting. We have Arn Anderson being teased as a potential manager or coach or something for Cody Rhodes. I'm not too sure how they also tease it as maybe a personal consultant. So I'm not sure where this plays in. The only reason I have a big issue with it is because like Cody's a great promo, so I don't really see the need for Arn.
He's a
decent. The enforcer role is interesting. He's an older man, so he's still a big guy, and he could still lay down a spine buster or two. But I don't see how much help he adds as a manager, and managers really make more sense for a heel role, if you ask me.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and I'm not against this or anything. I'm kind of interested in what they're going to do with it, but Tully Blanchard and Shawn Spears is interesting because you have, like you said, it's a heel role, but Arn Anderson and Cody Rhodes, it's just like, okay. There's nothing, like you said, it's not the most exciting thing in the world, but it's interesting. That's what I'll give it.
I hope that it's not just a situation being set up for MJF to lay down his demands for Cody, and then Arn Anderson to be like, Cody, you could never do this. You can never lay these things on the line.
Oh.
And that's basically the only role or the only reason that they're initiating him into anything. But you have to imagine they have a plan for it or a reason for it. But like I said, Cody's a great promo. Arn Anderson's a great guy. But unless this is a way to maybe he manages Cody for a little bit and transitions off with someone else, I would like that a little bit better, because Arn can be a great manager and can be a great person in that role.
Mm-hmm.
And utilizing
Absolutely.
managers can be interesting for AEW, but it just feels weird in this dynamic. Cody has so many people around him, too, that it just seemed unnecessary.
I'm trying to think of who I would like better with Arn Anderson on them as a manager, but nothing's
Hangman
coming to
Hilton
mind right.
with Arn Anderson.
Yeah, anything honestly would be. I feel like utilizing Arn Anderson is not a bad thing at all. It's actually great, and he has all the experience in the world. So it's awesome to see that he's getting to actually have a role in wrestling and not just be behind the scenes, because he's still obviously doing that. But overall, it's interesting. That's all I'm gonna say, because I don't want to say it's bad or good or it's something's wrong with it, but I just got to see where it goes. It's one of those things.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, that I just have to see where they go with it and what their plans are, because I just don't totally know, you know? I mean, Arn,
Yeah.
as you said, he's great in many roles, and he would play a great role as a manager type of role, but for Cody, it's just going to be weird until I see what their plans are, because I see Cody as such a great promo. He's been being hailed as this great promo, and so outside of just being there to even up the numbers for Cody, which is fine. It's fine, but Cody just tends to have a lot of older people around him, so which is interesting, I guess. At least he's not holding back the younger crowd of saying, like, I need Anthony Ogogo and Wardlow and all the big men around me protecting me to build me up. He's sort of just utilizing the presence of these older generation, which isn't a bad thing.
What happened to DDP? Wasn't that his role basically?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I mean when I talk about it's weird, because we have so many people in these roles. We had MJF, and obviously he turned, but we still Cody had DDP. He has Brandy. He has his brother. He has Arn, and the positive thing about Arn is he has been introduced as a person alongside Cody for a very long time. So it's not random or brand new. It's just a little bit like, gee, Cody, how many people do you need surrounding you?
You know what I wish? I wish Arn Anderson was announced to be the general manager instead, or a commissioner, or because we really need a role like that instead of the powers that be or Tony Khan behind a curtain.
Yeah, and that's interesting, because they did tease, or maybe not tease it, but that was something speculated upon on social media or the internet over the past week, when they were talking about how Taz would be at Dynamite this week. Some people were thinking that Taz might be introduced in that role. It was then sort of confirmed that they have no desires to introduce that role in their professional wrestling realm, which is fine and understandable. It's just like you said, it can be difficult to book matches or book certain things without that, without that role, that person dictating who does what and what's allowed, and what type of matches are set in place and things like that. It's a lot easier when you have that commissioner role or something, and they don't have to be a good guy or a bad guy. They can literally just be there. The way William Regal sometimes pops up, makes a match, and leaves, and that's it.
Yep, exactly.
They don't, so you can do the commissioner role different, or just do it, downplay it, but you just have to, you kind of need it, or it would help a lot in AEW and make more sense of the booking of ranked matches and unranked and things like that too. So that would be helpful.
Yeah, it would be super helpful. It sucks that apparently they have no desire to do it, but hopefully that could, I don't know, who knows, anything could happen.
Yeah, anything could happen. Heck, they're doing the rankings reset, which we didn't think was going to happen.
Yeah.
And then we got official confirmation of that over the Christmas break, which I thought was a really lousy way to do it, if you ask me.
Yeah.
I do like the idea of it. I'm glad that they're doing it. I'm glad that I think that this time next year, we'll be talking about how this was we'll be talking about how much better it is, how much better they do it next year, how much better the reset is, how fresh it feels, how good it is. Whereas this year, it really just feels Like they just did it really lousy too, and I
Yeah.
get almost to a point of not promoting it, not building it up, because then you have to sort of deliver those matchups with Moxley versus Jericho, like the end of the year matchups that we should be getting that we're not because they want to save
Yeah.
them for the pay-per-view, which is fine and I get it, but you do see the issue with that. Where we're closing out the year doing the final rankings of 2019, and it just kind of the bright side is they are paying off with it in the women's division for sure, with
Mhm.
Hikaru Shida and all these women getting their championship opportunity, with Kris Statlander being pulled out of this week's match, which is I guess something we should definitely talk about as well.
Yeah. Uh, but like you said, the rankings just being reset with a tweet was very odd to me. If you knew you were going to do this, and my only thinking is that they did not know for sure that they were going to do this, which is kind of poor planning, I think, because otherwise, why would you not announce it on TV or talk about this way earlier?
Like I said, I feel like it could have just been the desire to downplay it, make it not be so important in the grand scheme of things right now, where people just
I
aren't focused on
guess.
it. Because if you're pushing it as a big deal at the end of the year, you're kind of pushing like, and the number one contender will want to be the get a championship match at the New
I
Year's
get
Eve
it.
show or the New Year's show. So I think in that aspect, it's almost a downer that I get why we're not getting Jericho versus Mox on New Year's Day or whatever, but it all kind of plays into this weird thing with them not promoting it. I think was probably the best thing you could do if you're not going to provide all those matchups on the last show, because it almost built itself to where I think if they had better foresight, they could have been booking to this straight off of Full Gear, like now our New Year's Day
Mhm.
show is the next big show, and whoever is
Yeah.
number one ranked going into 2020 will get a title match on that show. And I wish they had done something like that, because I think that would have been like a really, really good idea. And
Yep.
I think a missed opportunity with the way that the dates fall, and with them only having, like, they're the only show running on New Year's Day, I believe. I don't believe NXT's running anything, or they might be running a
I
highlight
think it's a
show.
tape show.
Or
Yeah.
yeah, so with that being the situation, you missed a good opportunity there to really hype up this show, having that week off and everything. So I'm not saying they did a bad job. I think if anything, it was legitimately just to downplay the fact that they weren't going to pay off
Mhm.
everything. They did, because like I
Yeah.
said, they did pay off some things, and let's go ahead and talk about that. Kris Statlander, apparently being double booked for bar wrestling as well as AEW on this Wednesday show, which some people on the internet saw coming when they saw Kris Statlander win. They knew of her booking at bar wrestling, and they were kind of confused and assumed that she would just be pulled from the independent show. Turns out AEW is going to utilize this mistake as an opportunity to pull Kris out of that match, put her in a match the following week. Instead, this week we get Rio versus, what is it, Nyla Rose, Hikaru
Yes.
Shida, and Britt Baker for the
Yep.
AEW Women's Championship. That one is going to be a banger. I think it's a really
Yes.
interesting mix-up of women, and I think a good opportunity to keep the title on Rio without having to beat anyone important like Nyla or Britt. She could easily pin Hikaru. All of these women make sense in the position of winning a championship match, but it is unfortunate to see the Statlander match have to be pulled.
Yeah, and I'm kind of wondering what that like means for the Statlander match. Does that mean it's just not happening? Are we gonna get
Oh
it at the
no, no.
pay-per-view or
Next, well, the following week they will be doing Kris Statlander versus the winner of
okay.
this four-way for the women's championship. So we're getting back-to-back women's title matches, which again
Wow.
is a great thing, because that title has not been seen too much on
Yeah.
AEW TV. We haven't seen much of Rio. I was wondering what was going on, but now at least we're getting a couple shows back-to-back with Rio involved. So I think a good utilization of the rankings, and again a good way to make the best out of a mistake.
Yeah, this is gonna be a great match, like you said, an absolute banger. But yeah, that cleared that up for me. I'm my only thing is I don't I don't know why they're pushing Nyla Rose so hard. I know, I understand, I get it, but she was suspended and she was still on the rankings, and I get that she is like in the top 5, but wasn't like she off TV for like I don't know 3 weeks?
She just wasn't too promoted on television, which I agree with you there in that confusion. And she does have a decent record, but I wonder what Kong's record would be put up against her.
Yeah.
She's someone that I would think should be involved in this top 5 at this point, because I think she's just like 2-0. Or
Yeah.
maybe 2-1 due to a tag team loss with Brandy. But still, I don't know. Nyla fits into this match pretty well for me, though. I think with the 4 of them, it's a good choice. I've liked the booking of Nyla more as I've sort of taken time to think about it and watch it and see, like, okay, they built her up and then suspended her to sort of cool it down without having to have her lose, but also being able to incorporate her into a match because she does fit right into this match. She's not rolling off of any losses or anything. It's just sort of lack of TV time, like you said, but she has the chance to now come back, be a beast, and lose, but not lose, but not win either, which is perfect for her in this case, in this scenario.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing with this match is I'm just really, really hoping that Rio does win because it's a fatal 4-way. You never know what they're going to pull.
Yeah, that is true. You never know, and I do think that Rio is probably the best choice to keep as champion. The reason that I would say I'm pretty confident she retains is just because, like I said, she hasn't been focused on TV, so it would be really a disservice to everything they built up in the beginning to pull the title off her right now in this way. Maybe next week versus Kris, and that would be an interesting way to do it, She's not able to compete in this match because of a double booking, and then comes back the following week and wins the AEW Women's Championship. That would be incredible to see.
Yeah, that would be pretty sick. And it would set up a nice rematch at the pay-per-view, or, well, maybe not the pay-per-view, but whenever. I would be into that a lot.
Yeah, and it sets up the underdog story for Rio to have to eventually climb those rankings again too. Rio is a good champion and an interesting champion, but I think it would be a good time now to pull the belt off of her. And like I said, this works way better for Kris because you get a match in this week where Rio can retain by magnificent odds, and then the following week defend against Kris, and hopefully Kris could potentially win. I mean, I don't see a reason not to continue riding a hot hand who has been putting on good matches and doing a great job so far. Now, the only problem that could happen is you book Kris to win and the match isn't that good because Rio is good, and if you do have it with Rio, it would be difficult to see that be the situation and the scenario that happens. But nonetheless, I think it wouldn't be a bad idea to push Kris because Rio's not a bad champion, but again, she fits that role of a chaser better than a defending champion, especially because she hasn't gotten too much of an opportunity to showcase that. So right now, I would rather see her go into the new year chasing.
Yeah, and like you said, she's a perfect fit to be an underdog, and she was just so over with the fans whenever she was on TV regularly. So I'm glad that we're going to be seeing her overall.
Oh, yeah, me too. I'm excited for this match, and that's going to be an interesting one. But that really wraps up most of our news for this week. Let's go ahead and talk about this week's rankings. They went ahead and posted updated rankings as of December 25th. Let's go ahead and talk about them. We'll just talk about the women's division really quickly because we basically ran through all that. We have Kris Statlander at number 1. Britt Baker at number 2, Hikaru Shida at number 3, Nyla Rose at 4, and Emi Sakura at 5. So Emi, the odd one out of the championship fold, but still, this is where utilizing rankings and booking smart has really helped AEW because all of these women feel like they could be potential champions. Britt, Hikaru, Nyla, and Kris, all 4 are believable enough champions. Now, Nyla, I will give you. Hikaru, I will kind of give you as well because Hikaru's riding a couple of losses. Nyla just hasn't had the best overall run. She's mainly been doing a lot of squashes. But still, these 3 women have all been booked well enough to be believable champions. You have 4 believable women's contenders, which I think is the best thing about AEW right now is that they've done such a good job with these women. So
I think they've booked the women's division brilliantly. I think it's been nice long-term booking that makes sense. And like you said, every single person here makes sense as a contender and as a champion. So I don't know. I can't say too much. I don't have anything negative to say about this. And Kris Statlander being number 1 is cool. She's obviously undefeated, I think, or maybe in singles competition, not in tag competition. But as a singles competitor, she's undefeated, and she's been riding this high like you were talking about. So that's perfect for the number one spot. And now, and she's also, of course, the number one contender. So that makes perfect sense. And Britt Baker is just like you were saying. She's such a believable champion. She has a lot of people who really love her. I'm not the biggest Britt Baker fan, I'll be honest, but I know a lot of people who are, and I know a lot of people who are really over on her. So that's great. And Hikaru Shida, like you said, she's been riding a couple losses, but before that, she was on a hot streak.
Yeah, exactly. So just a great overall job with the women's division, and something that I really enjoy, and I'm excited for this Fatal 4-Way because it's something we talk about on this podcast almost every week, where we love these matches where you don't know who's going to win, where you feel like there could be an exciting moment, and every time Rio wins, I'm excited. So
yeah,
especially with the title on the line. So I'm excited for this one. That's going to be exciting. Let's go ahead and talk about the tag team division rankings. Sitting at number 1, we have Santana and Ortiz. At number 2, the Young Bucks. At number 3, the Lucha Brothers. At number 4, the Best Friends. And at number 5, the Dark Order, after their attack. And just the end of last week's episode did not leave, or 2 weeks ago, I should say, episode did not leave a good taste in so many people's mouth because of the Dark Order. But they are still on these rankings. So what are your thoughts?
I'm happy that Santana and Ortiz are number 1. That's my main thought. I'm glad to see they're back on top, and I'm hoping that means we're getting a tag team, or at least a contendership down the line for Santana and Ortiz, because God, they're so cool. They're so good. They're one of my favorite tag teams in a really long time. Other than that, makes sense. Young Bucks dropped off to number 2 after losing. Lucha Bros are kind of just hanging around there. And like you said, Dark Order, bad taste in basically everybody's mouth, mine included. But there's no reason to move them. Really?
Yeah, he said he likes the Dark Order.
I like the Dark Order too. I just don't like how they execute on it sometimes.
Yeah, I really didn't enjoy the end of how all of that went, and I didn't enjoy the way that they just were able to be lambasted on Twitter and just destroyed for those punches and stuff. Like, it was just a really unfortunate way to close out the year for AEW, so to speak. But nonetheless, they are on this rankings. I like the Best Friends being involved at number 4. I don't know if you saw this week's episode of Being the Elite, but the Best Friends are sort of doing a little situation with Kris Statlander. Maybe not the Best Friends per se, I guess. Their boy Orange Cassidy and Kris Statlander have this bit of a love connection, and it was very, very silly but interesting, and an interesting way to sort of explain the aura of Orange Cassidy as well, if you will. That he's a little bit extraterrestrial or something, but it's interesting and it's cool.
That's ridiculous, so I like that. And I love it.
So worth talking about. And the Best Friends, of course, are always worth talking about. Trent getting a big opportunity on this week's episode against Jon Moxley. So we'll get into that when we talk about this week's Dynamite match card overall. But yeah, I'm with you on the fact that I'm glad that Proud and Powerful is so high on the rankings, as they should be. A great team, and a team that I would like to see be the next AEW Tag Team Champion. So if this is the start of that, that's what I would like to see.
Me too.
And then going to the men's singles division, we have Jon Moxley sitting at number 1 still, Kenny Omega at number 2, Pac at number 3, Cody at number 4, and MJF at number 5. So really no change here, as you would expect, because there really was nothing to base it off of except for last week's episode of Dark. But still, good set of rankings. Moxley at number 1 is never a bad thing. Kenny Omega continues to be a great, so many people have complained about how he's been booked, but his overall record is 9-5. His singles record is 5-2. So I don't get it. I get that people aren't totally as hot on him, but you very easily could, at the flip of a switch, just put Omega back into that championship fold, which I think we could end up seeing. I could see the idea being you have Moxley take that title from Jericho go away for a bit, and you have Moxley Omega as your main feud when Jericho's gone. And that's a smart feud to book on top when you're without Jericho. So I think that could be the direction we're going, and Omega being at number 2 sort of hints to that.
Yeah, and Omega hasn't gotten over that loss against Jon Moxley. It's been clear that he had almost a downward spiral because of it. And so I could totally see after the pay-per-view, things are cooled down, that you revisit Kenny Omega in the championship scene. I think people are just upset that he is not being booked as like this undefeated god, which is weird because he really has a great record and he's just been booked fine. There's nothing wrong with
Like,
that,
dude,
and he doesn't necessarily need to be at the
there's
main
no
event.
one who even comes very close in terms of overall output of matches in AEW. The
Yeah,
man has had 14 matches in the company thus far. The Young Bucks even are they've had 15. So yes, you can say that these guys, or that Omega hasn't been putting on a show, or that the Young Bucks even haven't they haven't been booked properly. But when you look at their records and everything, they have 9 wins. These are more wins than anyone
yeah.
else in the divisions that they're representing. So it's just, I don't know, why are we complaining?
I'm certainly not.
We have, we have,
Have we?
we have. We for
Kenny
surely
Omega?
have about Omega sometimes losing, and I think it was kind of maybe even the basis of our last episode in some ways, that we were sort of mad, or maybe not mad, but just talking about how they very clearly have booked themselves down a notch. And or it might not have been in the
You're
podcast, but
right,
we've
yeah.
definitely discussed it, where they've sort of booked themselves down a notch. And it was something that it was a little bit disappointing to see. But when you think about it from the booking aspect and everything, is they really haven't been doing that bad of a job when you
No.
aren't nitpicking it and you're able to look at it from just an overall record. But that is the difficult thing you run into when you went from being superstars to, and hell, we were fans who at the very beginning were like, we don't want to see them win every match on every card, but now we're almost questioning if that was the right thing.
Yeah. I agree. Also, this really made me realize how good that break was because you're right. We did get a little nitpicky on it, but yeah, there's really nothing to complain about with Kenny Omega right now.
Yep. So I'm excited to see where the whole situation with Omega goes, and that is very. I feel like I have a big, like I had a big recharge with AEW when I was able to watch their interview with Omega, and they did another interview with someone, the wrestlers ordering room service, and they did one I think with Jungle Boy and them. And it was just refreshing to get that
Hmm.
perspective of AEW, and sort of way refreshing to get Kenny's perspective. If you haven't watched it, AJ, you have to go listen, because it is a great interview, and a really interesting dynamic to get Kenny's perspective on a lot of the things, like dealing with leaving New Japan and dealing with like not being the total superstars that maybe people were expecting them to be in AEW. So it's nice to see, like, despite all of the critique or the frustration people have with how Omega's been booked, he still very easily slides in at number 2, pocket
Yeah.
number 3. I'm always going to be a little bit frustrated with the 4 and 5 slot until Cody or MJF. Like, I don't even say that
Yeah.
Cody needs to be pulled off of it, but it just, there, in some ways, it bothers me.
No, it bothers me too. It's not the worst thing in the world. It's not the weirdest thing in the world, but it's not right. And I do think Cody needs to be pulled off of it.
Yeah, so that's the one thing I think that really bothers me overall. Like I said, it's not a big issue or the end of the world, but I just wish that, like, and we constantly come back to the situation of, well, who would we put there instead? And that's where I'm going to say I'm now still just disappointed about it. Like, we should have Jungle Boy to slot in there, or Joey, or
Or Adam
Darby,
Page.
or Hangman, exactly. I'm not too mad about MJF, but he really hasn't done a lot to deserve that spot
No.
either, if you ask me, over the last couple of weeks. And,
He's
and
had
and
4
again,
matches
no
total.
one necessarily has. But shit, if they had let Trent win all of his matches, he could easily be in at number 5 now.
Yeah.
Um,
And is there like a thing where they won't put, like, if a tag team singular is winning, they won't put them in the men's rankings? Because I feel like they should, and they haven't done that.
yeah, I feel like Trent is someone who definitely should be in, almost in that position at this point. Maybe not totally, but I would argue or guess that his record as a singles is probably 2-1, just like MJF. He
Yeah.
definitely has a lot more losses as a tag team. But yeah, I don't know, man. But nonetheless, the rankings are not bad. They have continued to do a decent job. And as we see with the Kris Statlander issue, the rankings can be really beneficial when you run into that problem. Like, if they didn't do the rankings
Hmm.
thing, they easily could have replaced Chris, but with the rankings, you're easily able to tell such a quick story, and
Yep.
you're able to be honest about it. You don't have to hide it or try and be like, well, we didn't know with Chris. Like, they can be like, yep, we fucked up with Chris, and guess what? Here we have this cool match instead. And it'll still be cool and maybe even better. Who knows? Because you don't know what Chris versus Rio is going to bring. So I'm excited. I'm excited, especially with all of that. So
Me too. I am nervous because it's a fatal four-way, and so it could either be really great or it could be the shits. And it's going to be one of the two, but I'm hoping it's going to be a great match.
yeah, well, you better get nervous, AJ, because we're about to start talking about the best and the worst parts of AEW this year. So we saw on Twitter our boy at Danny Diaz 60. He created this little bit of a chart, and I don't know if he himself did it. He also talked about the Wrestling Observer. So I don't know if this was direct from the Observer or if he got this info from the Observer and utilized it to make these charts. But nonetheless, he put together some stuff. We're gonna quickly run through each segment. I'll run through the top 10 of the worst and the top 10 of the best, and then AJ and I will talk about them each individual. Well, each half and half, I guess. But let's talk about first the worst. The number one segment in terms of losing viewers this year was Darby Allin versus Jimmy Havoc. They lost 196,000 viewers. This was on the October 9th show. The number two worst drawing or worst segment, I should say, would be Private Party versus Santana and Ortiz. They lost 196,000 viewers there. Number three would be Ortiz and Santana versus John Silver and Alex Reynolds, as well as a Chris Jericho interview and a Cody video package that lost 174,000 viewers. And I should say these are broken down into quarterly hour rankings, so every 15 minutes the ratings are done. So then number four would be Private Party versus Dark Order, where they lost 150,000. And let's just do the top five, actually. We got Kenny Omega versus Joey Janela losing 131,000. AJ, this was one of our favorite matches.
I know.
All these matches, almost including people that we love in either Private Party or Proud and Powerful or the Dark, like maybe not the Dark Order, but Omega and Janela, like Darby Allin. What do you think here?
I am so disappointed that Omega and Janela lost 131,000 viewers because that might be one of my favorite matches of AEW in general. That was so good. It was great. Maybe not ever, but it's up there. It's in probably like the top 10. And so I don't know. That was disappointing. And I don't know, the Private Party and Santana Ortiz, I love both those tag teams. I think they're both great, and so that's disappointing. Ortiz and the Beaver Boys, that makes sense. Or Ortiz and Santana, I mean, but and the Dark Order also makes sense to me. But to see Private Party constantly losing viewers is upsetting.
Yeah, you see it, and what would make sense is it's fans not being too familiar with these faces, and you obviously don't know what these segments are up against in terms of the opposing show. That is obviously very important, what NXT is showing at that time. So this is definitely not, like, we're not saying these are the worst segments. We're just saying these are the segments that lost the most amount of viewers since AEW has started, and it really means nothing, I would say, in general. I think the most that I get from this is that when they do a lot of commercials, they lose viewers, which is obvious. Or when they do long commercials, which is obvious. Or when they package a commercial followed by an interview, followed by a commercial, followed by a video package. Because these are things that fans know that they can catch later in highlights, or if it's important, they'll catch it. Like, it'll be replayed. So these things are the things you tune into the other show for. But when it's like action-packed matches, fans are staying tuned in. Now with that Kenny Omega versus Janela match, they had two very long commercial breaks. So again, these are things that are going to make people want to tune into what's going on the other product. And if they're providing something good enough, then that's where you're going to see a lot of people change the channel. I guess we didn't get to number 6, but Pac versus Adam Page lost 125,000 viewers. That was something you and I had talked about that you were surprised about, but then I had to tell you, well, that was the October 2nd show, the very first show. That literally probably was when Finn Balor was making his debut on NXT, so of course people are going to change the channel. And even if that wasn't the exact segment that it was up against, there were big things happening that night. So it's worth noting that we're not trying to say these were the best segments or the worst segments, but you can tell that it's the new faces and it's the commercial breaks.
Yeah, it's definitely the commercial breaks. That's the key component, like you were saying. Um, and it's not like, oh, this is indicative that Private Party isn't over, because of course Private Party isn't over. That's the goal. You have to get them over. And so it's not the worst thing in the world. It's not like, oh, this is the shit list. It's just that this is, these are the numbers.
Well, and the thing about it is with Private Party, if if the match with the Young Bucks was on here and they lost 250,000 viewers in
Yeah.
that match, then you would know that it's Private Party. I really don't think it's them. I think it does have a lot to do with who they're matched up against and the fact that fans aren't totally familiar with them or Proud and Powerful. So these are important things to keep in mind. And again, you don't know what is going on NXT at this point in time. So it's really just worth noting. Like I said, it's worth the biggest things to take away from this are that new faces are hard for fans to become familiar with, and the best way to do that is going to be those matches like the Private Party versus Young Buck match, things like that. And the other thing is just the commercial breaks and the way that they're pairing them up with interviews and stuff like that. They have to get creative and maybe doing these in different ways.
Yeah, they need to figure out. I also don't. I know this is kind of off topic, but the way they do picture in picture half the time, I really don't
Mhm.
like it, and they really need to figure out just how they need to navigate these commercial breaks, because I know their goal is don't get the person to change the channel, keep them on the show, but I think it affects the show negatively.
I think it just makes people feel like they can change the channel during those matches at any
Yeah.
point in time because it doesn't mean as much. Or in other cases, it just makes you wonder why every match doesn't get that treatment as well. I
Hmm.
know I've been had to ask myself that question, like why are you using picture in picture for this match but not this match?
Yeah.
So it just becomes a confusing thing in that case. But you say it's off topic, but I would almost argue that it's on topic because I would bet you that those matches with those long commercial breaks have those picture-in-picture breaks because they think
Hmm.
that they can get away with it, and it's not helping, and it's not a good thing. And this is where I think they're going to learn that a 20-minute match on TV might not work unless you do it only once every so often and
Yeah.
sort of slot it in your main event spot, not wherever you want.
Hmm. Absolutely.
Because that is one of the bigger issues is just trying to maintain people's attention through those
Yep.
commercial breaks. And like you said, the idea is to make people want to watch what's on the picture in picture, but I'm not going to squint my eyes to try and tell what's going
No,
on
me
there.
neither.
So what is the point then?
It's really odd, and I think I don't know. I get it. I understand the idea behind it, but the execution, it's just not working. And then a lot of times you have things like the picture in picture are airing literal interviews or segments, and you can't hear them, and it's just weird.
Well, and where
And I
that's a
don't know.
problem too is if it was always matches, you would be tuned into what's in the picture in picture. For example, if the NFL did because they do picture in picture as well, other sports are doing this, and people kind of tune in because what's on the picture in picture is always going to be important. It's not just
Mhm.
oh let's show the sideline for 5 minutes while we show commercials for 5 minutes. And sometimes
Yeah.
that's all it is with the picture in picture. It's like Chris Jericho walking through the back, yelling at the camera with the stuff you
Hmm.
can't hear, which is great for the whatever fans have the
Fight
fight
TV,
TV
live
stuff, yeah.
audience,
But otherwise, it just
nothing.
it
Yeah.
doesn't help, and I think that's where they're also being hurt. I think the picture in picture might have a better effect if it was only ever used during a match. If they know
Hmm.
they're not during a match, they're like, just screw it, just do a regular commercial because then it might be more effective because it just seems so non-important.
Yeah. I totally agree.
And I don't watch enough NXT to know if they do it the exact same way because I know that they
I think
use
they
picture
do.
in picture, but I don't know if they've at least utilized the discipline to say we're only going to do it during a match, not during backstage segments because there's
That
really
I
not a
don't
whole
know.
lot of backstage on that show from what I've seen anyway. But I don't really watch a
Yeah.
ton of NXT. But yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing that AEW could start to get right or could take from that is we need to utilize a lot more of the in ring and a lot less of the other the
The
entertainment.
segments. Yeah.
And I think
Absolutely.
we might get that through the top 10. So let's go ahead and we'll talk about the top 5 of the best drawing segments. The number 1 drawing segment, Chris Jericho versus Jungle Boy, gained
Yeah.
135,000 viewers. This one was the first one that surprised me, and granted it's the first one on the list, but this was not a match I necessarily expected to be a drawing match per se. It's exactly what I said with Private Party versus the Young Bucks in the example of Jungle Boy is a new face, but fans are willing to tune into him versus Jericho because it's Jericho, and it's a cool thing. And this match took up the whole 15-minute segment. So
Yeah. This is surprising to me how well it did. Not that it did well, because I thought it would do well, but I didn't know if it was going to be like a top 10 drawing segment, let alone number 1. Jungle Boy is clearly, if there was ever a question of can Jungle Boy be a top guy, here's your answer. Yeah, he can, and he can clearly. I know it's more Chris Jericho here, but it's Chris Jericho versus an opponent, and that's the takeaway.
well, and the
And
thing is, Jericho's had other matches, and
yeah,
they don't necessarily have that same spot. Jericho versus Sky does end up placing at number 9 on this list, but that's still lower. This was number 1.
yeah.
There's a aspect of Jungle Boy that factors into that, I would have to say. So
Yeah.
that's a great thing. That's a great thing for Jungle Boy. A great thing, and Jericho, undoubtedly. You were going to hear his name over and over. So let's go ahead and talk about number 2. A Jericho promo, as well as the beginning of a Kris Statlander versus Hikaru Shida match, saw 115,000 gain. Another notable Jericho one. I think that's, like I said, something we're going to get here a lot. The number 3 one, we had the Chris Jericho and MJF showdown where they were chatting, and Cody ran in, and we also saw the debut of Wardlow. This whole segment did 1 million viewers. That's just a testament to MJF and Jericho, I would say. I should say Jericho and MJF, but it's not totally MJF, of course. But MJF has like that ability to spit fire on the mic where
Yeah.
people will stay captivated in a like literally 15-minute long interview segment between the two of them. This was a good showing.
Yeah, and it's not a segment I necessarily loved either, which was like this one surprised me because this one I thought dragged on a long time, and I liked it at the beginning, and then I thought it dropped off, but apparently it did not. It did great, and so like you said, MJF, just another great showing from him, and another great, just it proves his ability.
Well, and the important thing of this was the debut of Wardlow, and they had 1 million people tuned in.
Yeah.
So, and Wardlow wasn't the main focus or the primary focus even, but he was a point in this, and it was a good time to get eyes on him, and a good thing for AEW, I would have to say, just because he's one of the bigger dudes on the roster, and that's something that is appealing to the outside fan. So if this is when we had some of the most people tuned in, that's an important thing.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing I'm thinking right now is using Jericho to get other things over is something they really need to be doing because it clearly works.
Yeah, it's a matter of being careful with it, and that's where Jericho's such a great person for this, because other people might easily be manipulated into either putting over a bunch of people and losing that stigma really quick, kind of like maybe even Kurt Angle and Impact, because while he did get that big push, a lot of losses came that were kind of confusing to fans, and it hurt everything he had built. So with Jericho, while he very clearly is the top drawing person, they're not really wasting that on anybody or anything, and I'm glad to see that the thing with Jungle Boy was one of the things that brought in the most viewers, or at least attracted the most viewers. And that's something I guess I want to make clear. This isn't saying that these were necessarily the like Jungle Boy versus Jericho didn't have the most viewers in AEW history. It just gained the most viewers. So that's worth being clear about.
And
Then,
like how it helped Kris Statlander and Hikaru Shida, because you have the Jericho promo, which was probably the thing that drew people in, but then you have them sticking around for Kris Statlander and Hikaru Shida and getting to see them.
and undoubtedly helping Chris over the long run. I mean, you've seen the way that, like, you can't all attribute it to a Jericho promo that happened beforehand, but Chris has just continued to get over, and the eyes on her, so it's just been a great job there. Then let's go ahead and talk about what was at number 4. We had another Chris Jericho interview, big surprise, and the end of the AEW the Ring Battle Royal. So Jericho continues to be a prominent figure in this if you haven't taken notice. And number 5, of course, is the end of a Cody and Chris Jericho angle, as well as the beginning of the Young Bucks versus the Best Friends, which saw a gain of 83,000 viewers. So you just see the continuing trend here. The only other person who makes so many mentions on this list, I would have to say, is probably Moxley.
Yeah.
So very clearly Jericho is the guy in AEW, and anyone who was ever questioning them hooking everything to him going into the beginning should just feel wrong. And hell, that might have even been me when I was talking about him versus Hangman early on. But it's clear Jericho's the person that people tune in to see.
Yep.
And I think he's sort of the person that can drag in people from the other show or other shows that are going on. So very interesting. And again, this isn't the end all be all, but I do think that it's very telling that Jericho shows up in literally 9 out of the 10 most.
It's super indicative. And it's clear that NXT doesn't have a star that can hold a candle to Chris Jericho in terms of star power, then sheer drawing power. And I'm not saying that NXT doesn't have stars. They of course do, and they have Finn Balor, and they have it's a great show. They have Finn Balor, but it's not, Finn Balor ain't Chris Jericho.
No, you're not wrong, and it's cool. It's interesting to see the way that it obviously helped Jungle Boy. And as I was talking about Moxley, we'll talk about the number 6 one on this list too. Moxley versus Darby Allin saw an increase of 52,000 in that 18 to 49 demographic. So that's big. It's big for Darby to get that shine off of Moxley the same way it was for Jungle Boy. And it's big to see that these matches, these fresh matches, can draw. And these fresh matches can bring people in to say, well, maybe we don't want to see Hangman versus Pac, but we would love to see Moxley versus your new fresh face in Darby Allin, or Chris Jericho and your new fresh baby meat Jungle Boy. You know what I mean? So there's just so much that they've been able to do well.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. And I think it's telling about how you're able to get these guys like Darby Allin over, and you're able to get these people like Kris Statlander, Karushida, MJF, Wardlow. All these people are getting the rub off these guys, and it's great.
Well, yeah, Darby, someone who was listed number 1 on the most people tuned out, was able to get a bunch of people to tune in when he faces Moxley. So it all depends on who the opponent is, the right opponent, the right build up to it as well. I think that it'll be interesting to see what Cody versus Darby does this week. That could be an interesting one. So
that's interesting.
We'll get into the Dynamite card here in a minute, but before we jump to that, let's go ahead and talk about last week's episode of Dark, the Christmas Eve edition. Normally we talk about the Dark match card at this point, but I don't believe there will be a Dark match or a Dark show tomorrow. I don't know when they could have taped it. There's absolutely nothing for results anyway, so it would make sense that there would be nothing with no show last week. So let's go ahead and talk about last week's episode of Dark. We had Colt Cabana doing commentary, which is a great position for the man. Colt Cabana does a great job on the commentary booth, and is just fantastic at what he does regardless. So he did a great job on this week's episode of Dark. It was refreshing to hear him in that position, and someone you could really, really expect to fit in that role if he ever decided to do it full time. He obviously works with the NWA promotion right now, does a lot for NWA Power. So he's been an interesting aspect on that product, but he was good to see here. We got to see Sammy Guevara take on Brandon Cutler. He got the quick win here, so the Spanish God able to get a nice win over Brandon Cutler, someone who really doesn't have the best record. And there were a couple interesting moments in this where Excalibur is trying to put over a wrist lock that Sammy did, and he's like, "That's an excellent wrist lock," and Colt's like, "You'd call that excellent?" And Excalibur was like, "Yeah, it's a little loose." And it was just, it's cool to see Colt in that position, dude, because he could play a great heel commentator, or maybe not even heel, but just real, straight to the point. So that was good.
Absolutely. Colt was doing great on commentary. I want to double down on that. He was absolutely on, and maybe one of the best, if not the best, special guest commentators we had. Taz did great too, but
I think that Colt was the best. Taz, you're right, did did do a great job, but in this realm, someone who fits so perfect is Colt. I like the utilization of guys like Taz and Tony and Jim Ross, but if you can bring in a Colt, someone who legitimately has that background in this realm, and even maybe more so than Excalibur has that professional feel to him as well, I think he would be the best in that role if you had to take Excalibur out for any reason, just because Colt does such a great job. So
Yeah, absolutely.
then the next match, we get Proud and Powerful taking on the Hybrid 2, Private Party, and the Best Friends in a 4-way tag team match. Good win for Proud and Powerful. One thing I was wondering when I was watching this is, does every team who loses take a loss on their record? That's something I've wondered. It would make sense, but it's an interesting aspect of rankings.
Yeah, and it makes sense that Proud and Powerful shot up to number one. But yeah, I think everybody would take a loss. I don't see why not. They really need to explain that, because I wonder what it's like for triple threats and fatal four ways. But if it's the same concept that everybody who loses, takes the loss, then yeah, I would say so. This was a great match, though.
Yeah, definitely a good showing. All four of these teams are really great, and a good showing for them. I like the Hybrid too. I would like to see a lot more of them. I would like to see them be somebody's like their personal team or something. You know what I mean? In the realm of Proud and Powerful with Jericho, and I don't necessarily know who I would pair them with, but I just like them as a duo. Well, I like them being showcased more.
Yeah, they're so fun, and they always have great matches, and Jack Evans is so charismatic.
Yeah, so they're great. We then get the Bastard Pac, who's always great. He brings out Michael Nakazawa, tries to get Kenny Omega out, but Omega doesn't show up.
Pillmanize his neck, dude.
Yeah, dude. So
he was gonna kill the dude.
Where is Omega? Great. Why is he not saving his friend?
I don't know. I was wondering that too. He was just gonna let him get murdered.
He's like, it's after, I don't get paid after dark, so.
Yeah, he bounced, went back to Canada.
Then we get, speaking of Canada, we get Joey Janela taking on Shawn Spears, and Joey Janela's dressed up as Santa Claus.
This was amazing.
This was a great...
I don't know if you like it, but I loved it.
It was different, man, and it was good to see. Like, what's different to me is the closing segment, and obviously I didn't air the whole thing too, so that's good. But even just the Janela beer bash thing, like it fits Janela's character and stuff. But the fact that it's trying to be an homage to Stone Cold because it was his birthday that day, but Stone Cold doesn't really work with AEW or anything, that was kind of just different to me. Maybe that's them trying to really buddy up to him and get him on a commentary spot one of these weeks or something, but that would be worth talking about.
Yeah, I just love the fact that Joey Janela was dressed up as Santa Claus kicking Shawn Spears' ass. I thought that was perfect. I can't ask for much more on an AEW Dark episode.
What a weird, sign of Joey becoming AEW's Mick Foley. In the down the line and the whole scheme of things. Like, I would love to see Joey create his own Faces of Joey, where he just becomes some alter ego at some point.
Suicide is coming.
Just because he does the whole Santa Claus thing like Mick, and he's just got the same type of attitude like Mick, where he's like this free spirit who just is cheap.
Yeah, cheap free spirit. That's perfect for Joey Janela.
But Joey's a little bit more of a drinker than Mick, so there's that. But no, dude, I thought this was good, and it was great for when it was positioned. They didn't try and force the Christmas thing a week early because they were off for Christmas. They just, I guess they did force the Christmas thing a week early to the live fans, but they were able to utilize the content on Christmas Eve, which was
Jesus genius. Was there, Andrew. Jesus himself was in this match. I don't know what else to ask.
Dude, it was great, and it was genius just the way they were able to utilize it. Like I said, on Christmas Eve, make use of this match on that day, and really just it was cool. It's cool to see Joey in that position, in the main event getting a win. So if you don't know, if you haven't seen the hoopla on social media after the match, Shawn Spears takes a stunner from Aubrey Edwards. He then takes a stunner from Tony Khan. And then everyone gets drunk off White Claw. You either love it or you hate it. And they've kind of tried to go back on it a little bit with Spears taking all the credit for it and Khan saying he didn't really want to do it but had no choice. So it is what it is.
Yeah, I don't know. I liked it. I
I
thought it
hated
was
it.
fun.
I hated Tony Khan's stunner so bad, dude. That was so annoying. The way he just
I
sat there when he was done too, like
If it was on dark, I would hate it, but
okay,
it
that's
was
fair.
for the live crowd.
I didn't have to see it. I chose to see it, so it's my own fault. But yeah, it was weird, dude. And you're right. It wasn't on TV. It doesn't mean anything in anything. But when you're trying to push the idea of not trying to be involved, and then
Yeah,
turn around and show up on the show, well, not on the
that's
show,
fair.
but after the show and do some stunners, it's
Yeah, that's
different.
fair.
But it's nothing to be too upset about. It was a good ending to the dark episode, and then they sent the fans that were there home happy, so that's cool.
Yeah.
But let's go ahead and talk about this week's episode of Dynamite before we close out the show. AJ, we have the first match announced: Sammy Guevara versus Dustin. What are your thoughts on this one?
I think it's going to be a good match. I think it's going to be good for Sammy Guevara. Nothing too crazy. I'm not expecting it to be a 5-star classic, but I'm expecting it to be solid.
Yeah, I'm looking at it as a pretty legitimate win for Sammy going into the new
Yeah.
year. A nice 1-0 going into the new year as well, and a good way to sort of start establishing Sammy as that upper mid card or mid card kind of guy who has some more credibility behind him. A win right here will do a lot for him. I really feel like that, especially if they get a decent amount of time. This one actually I could see being a shorter match just because of how much they've tried to stuff on this card, but
Yeah.
it'll be a good one.
Yeah, this is going to be fun.
Another match that I could see being relatively short, we have Jon Moxley taking on Trent. We talked about this a little bit earlier. This is a big one for Trent, another big one for Trent, actually. He continues to get some pretty decent matchups, and the good thing about this is his matchups with Phoenix and Pentagon and all of these matchups beforehand have made him a little bit more of a credibility going into this match.
Yeah.
That being said, I don't see much from it. I could literally would be okay with it being a 3-minute match where Mox hits the paradigm shift and wins. So
I wouldn't want that because Trent's been looking good, but I could see it happening.
I mean, I don't want it to be like a literal just paradigm shift and win. He can get a minute of action where you feel like Trent's doing something, and then he just loses.
Yeah. Overall, though, if they do go along with this, I expect it to be a great match. Trent has been having great singles matches, so has Jon Moxley. So this could be a good match.
And you never know. The thing about this match is they could feed me into the idea of believing Trent could win. With Trent's, like I said, again, his credibility. Now, I don't think he will, but if they do enough fall season, if they make it run long enough, I could buy into it. So
And then Jon Moxley kind of has to work his way up the rankings, and so he has a little bit of a climb for the pay-per-view.
But that said, this will probably come off of Moxley's interaction with Jericho, where he lets him know that he's not going to join the inner circle.
Yeah.
And I imagine Moxley will be pissed off, so he'll just want to beat Trent down real quick. So I don't, like I said, I don't see it lasting too long. But I'm with you in the fact that if it does, it could be a really good one.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have some 6-man tag action, a match that I believe was supposed to happen at Fyter Fest, if I'm not mistaken. When we originally announced AEW, we have the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega taking on the Lucha Brothers and Pac. In that match, I believe Pac was replaced by Laredo Kid. So now we're getting the official thing on Dynamite, and this is going to be a good one. And
This is gonna be
good
crazy.
way, a cheap way for AEW to give Pac what he wants.
Yeah, this is going to be a crazy match, and I think it's going to leave Pac still wanting his singles match. So I think this is a great match. This is still going to be, and it's not 50-50 booking, It's not like, okay, we're just going to give you Pac and Omega. We're going to give you Pac and Omega in the tag match.
Yeah, we're going to build to it a little bit.
Yeah, and so I like this a lot.
And the thing I like about it, too, is I wouldn't mind seeing, even, like, we've complained about them losing so much, but I wouldn't mind seeing these guys open up the year with a loss and then start their run. Sort of the opposite way of Sammy Guevara, where I want to see him start off on the right foot immediately. I would sort of like to see them, because as fans, we're kind of expecting that, where Omega and the Bucks had a bad year, and they're going to turn it around now, where I'd like to see it still be like a little bit of that twist where they're like, oh, we still didn't fit. New year, new me isn't true. Like, and then next week they start getting it together. I think that would be an interesting play on it and a good way to give some guys who deserve a win, because Pac and the Lucha Brothers always deserve a win. So I think that's probably the most fun part about this card, is I could see each match going either way.
Yeah,
As I look
agree.
down and look through the whole card, I could see any of these matches going either way.
Yeah, this is a tough one to really pick a winner for. So I really do love that. Like you said, I have no idea who's going to win this tag match, and that leaves me very excited.
Yeah, and another one I have no idea who's going to win. I could see them going to another time limit draw
No
for
way.
all I know. Is Darby versus Cody. This one is I'm literally excited for this.
Yeah.
This one is going to be one that I'm sitting there just ready for. So
Yep. This is going to be an amazing match. We know it's going to be an amazing match because they had an amazing match. So there's no doubt about that. The only question is who's going to win, and I have no earthly idea.
yeah, dude, and that's the fun part about it is you have no idea who's going to win. And going into the first match, we had the idea that maybe Darby could get that win and sort of that rub, but he didn't. So now maybe we'll get it here.
Yeah, anything could happen here, or even it could be a recap where they do Broadway and then maybe Wardlow comes out and kills him. I wouldn't like that, but who
I could
knows?
see
I
it
really
being
have
like
no
either a
idea.
double disqualification or something like that, where Wardlow destroys them to sort of easily transition into the MJF segment
Could
and
be.
not really have to have either of these men lose here because I don't think either of them need to lose here either. So, if anything, I don't think Cody needs to win in this position. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
This one just easily could go either way because I think both guys could kind of use a win. I'm not gonna lie. I guess Cody could probably use a win at this point,
yeah.
but Darby hasn't been focused on too much, so he could also use a singles win as well.
Yeah, absolutely. They both really need a win here. Well, they're not need, but they could use a win here, and so that makes this really interesting.
Yeah, but I'll be surprised if it's not some natural transition to MJF coming out and announcing what his demands exactly would be. Joining or not joining but for his match with Cody, what his demands are. So
Yeah.
I'm curious to see if this sort of naturally transitions into that as I would expect and sort of piss the fans off in taking away a match that we're talking about this one already, but we should wrap up the show with it, of course. The main event, a match. Well, I guess I shouldn't say the main event for sure, but I hope it's the main event. We have Rio defending her women's championship against Britt Baker, Nyla Rose, and Hikaru Shida.
Mhm.
Unless they're going to close the show with some major shocking debut, which you never know. Maybe Austin Aries shows up in AEW.
Hardy.
Aries has
Free.
been pushing for it, so or Killer Cross. That would be a cool way to start off the year. I would. So I'm not saying that this will definitely be the main event, but if this isn't the main event, that needs to be the reason why. Because otherwise, there's no reason that you shouldn't be focusing on this women's division the same way you chose to focus on the tag team division and made that the main event. So
Speaking of, is Marty Scurll free to go to AEW if he wants to?
I think he would be free to, but it would be under more of an open deal at this point because he does have previous obligations. So I guess he could sign under an official deal, but would have to fulfill the rest of those obligations. So hell, you never know. That could be something to look forward to tomorrow as well. I would like to go into the new year with something fresh and exciting for AEW if possible.
Yeah.
And of course, we're going to get MJF announcing whatever his demands are. We'll also find out if Moxley's going to accept Jericho's challenge, as we kind of already talked about. And we'll get Taz making a guest appearance, which is something I'm definitely a little perplexed about with Arn Anderson
when could
being
that
announced
be?
as Cody's frontman. Like maybe this is where we'll have someone debut. Taz will make an appearance and say, I've got something for you, and here's someone I signed off the
Oh,
streets
that
for
would be cool.
AEW, and it's Tessa Blanchard, and the crowd goes
Oh,
wild.
fuck
No,
yeah.
like something like that would be lit, or be
Yeah.
really cool. Taz could easily introduce Killer Cross, if you ask me. So
Oh yeah, anybody. Really, he would be perfect for that. I wasn't even considering that, but now I really hope that's what it is. If it's not that, I have no idea what it's going to be.
no, if it's not that, and it's not him somehow being introduced as an authority figure, you do have to wonder what it potentially could be. I don't know if I would love Taz as an authority figure, but he'd be good in that Regal type role.
I
So
wouldn't hate it. Yeah.
and he's a badass who doesn't take anything and couldn't be bullied by wrestlers. So hey, that could be pretty cool.
Yeah.
But yeah, a good lot of things to get excited about going into the new year for AEW. We had a ton of stuff as far as the Tanahashi thing, Arn Anderson rankings reset. AJ, is there anything that you think we missed?
No, I can't think of anything.
That's good, man. That's good. We covered everything for the fans this week. As always, we'll be back on Wednesday right after AEW Dynamite for Wednesday night's main event to talk about our favorite match on the show, as well as everything that happened on this week's show. So definitely excited that AEW will be back on the air and that we're back on the air for everyone. AJ, go ahead and plug your social media.
You can follow me on Twitter at BigMatchAJ, and you can follow me on Instagram at AJ
And as always, you can follow me on Twitter at All Elite Andy. You can follow the podcast on Twitter at All Elite Podcast. We are also on Instagram at All Elite Everything. You can check out our website, alleliteeverything.com. And we are also on Facebook at facebook.com/AllElitePod. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in to the podcast this week and for sticking with us throughout the Christmas holiday. And until New Year's Day, we'll see you later.
Bye.